Uh, yes, I am assistant professor in Alvas Engineering College in ENC department. Good evening to Priyadarshini Bhatt there. Okay, no problem. Kini, you can go through the recorded sessions anytime. I have shared the link also. Okay, thanks for the comments. Right, right. Okay, we'll start the session. If somebody try to join in between, then you can WhatsApp. If somebody can help me, you can unmute and am I audible? Because just now the power is power down here. Okay, if I'm audible, then it's fine. Okay, then I will start our session. I'm using my mobile network now because there is no power. Okay, I'll be sharing my screen. So we will start with a little bit of rules and regulations. Then we'll move ahead with our basic electronic class. Okay, all right. So you should be aware of a little bit of rules and regulations whenever we are transmitting the signals or whenever we communicate with the other countries. Means international radio regulations. It is very, very important for all of us to be very well aware, and we should follow these rules to avoid any kind of complications or to avoid any kind of trouble. So first thing is the radio communication between two countries point of view. It means if there is any objections between the two countries with the administration point of view, then it is better to avoid the communication with such countries. So that care should be taken whenever we are transmitting or whenever we are try to have QSO with the other stations of other countries. So that is a point. All these rules and regulations will come in your examination. One of the other, they will ask the question in that way. For example, the question will come something like this: is it allowed to communicate between two countries which are forbidden from point of view of administration? True or false? Something like this, it will come. All right. So there is a first point. Second point is, when transmitting between two countries is done, then it must be it should be based only on the technical nature, and it's absolutely forbidden to use amateur station to transmit communication or message on behalf of third party. Means we have to communicate with two stations. We can communicate directly, but we cannot pass any information to other country. If somebody says, you please inform the other country about this something, it's absolutely not permitted. So that also we have to keep it in mind. And the third rule is, any person operating an amateur station must have proof that he/she is able to transmit and receive by ear in Morse code signals. It means, you know that the amateur radio station, a ham hobby, we'll get the two types of license, that is the restricted grade and general grade. So whenever we are transmitting the Morse code, we should be a general grade ham. Then only we are permitted to transmit the Morse code signals. Otherwise, we cannot. So we have to first pass that exam, that is general grade exam. Then only we can transmit the Morse code signals. Next is the details and these operating stations must be allowed to be verified by the administration if necessary. In case of verification, WP, the wireless planning and coordination, may ask an explanation at a time when there is a kind of obligations or there is a time where there is some concern is there. So that time they'll ask to submit or to check your radio equipment, or they will ask to submit certain documents which verifies the communication which take place between the two stations. So at that time, you should allow them to verify all the necessary documents and your radio stations. It is just to verify that the station is not used for any illegal operations. So fifth point is that the maximum power shall be fixed by administration depending on technical qualification of amateur and other conditions under which the station has to operate. It means, you know, that the general grade has certain restrictions that we can general and restricted grade use different powers to transmit the signal. So if you take the VHF signal with only 10 watts, whereas the general grade ham station can transmit the VHF with 25 watts. So this kind of power restriction is that the transmission signal power is restricted based on the type of license which we have. We will see this in the coming lessons, how much power is authorized for the restricted grade and how much power for the general grade, and for different types of communication, that might be VHF, that might be AM, that might be a high frequency communication. So we'll see all those things. Coming to the next point, any general rules of convention and precautionary regulations apply to amateur station also. It is important that the frequency must be highly stable and free from the harmonics. We will talk about these harmonics in the coming classes when we discuss the technical session. So at that time, we will come to this. It is something like this. The fundamental frequency will be there, and there will be certain harmonics. So whatever the transmitter is designed, for example, if the transmitter is designed to transmit at one particular frequency, then the similar kind of the transmission also takes place at its harmonic, means multiple of 3 or 5 or like these kind of 7, multiple of this. For example, if I am transmitting at say 1 kilohertz, then there will be an harmonic at 3 kilohertz, there will be an harmonic at 5 kilohertz, but that harmonic magnitude should be very less when compared to the main fundamental frequency. It means our radio equipment should be very much perfect to transmit only in that particular frequency. Otherwise, if there are more harmonics are there, then you are interfering with the other stations. During transmitting, a station must transmit its call sign at short interval. It means we cannot continuously talk for 30 minutes. We can, but when we are talking for a very long time, then in between, for every 10 minutes, we should repeat our call sign. If it is more than 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it is better always recognize our call sign, because if somebody is listening, they should know who is talking. It is not like it should not be like an unknown person who is always transmitting. If two people are transmitting continuously or talking continuously to each other, then every 10 minutes both the stations need to identify their call sign, so that the person who is listening should know who is communicating. Or if you want to join the communication, then he can join with that call sign by addressing to that call sign. Hope the rules and regulations are clear to you. These are very important rules and regulations which hope this is clear. Shall we move with the next topic? Kindly comment in the chat box. Okay. I hope you also have noted down these things. Okay. So let us move with the basic electronics topic here. So in the last session, we discussed about the inductor, capacitor, and the inductor. So capacitor, what happens? It will store the voltage, and inductor will create a magnetic field around it. So when we pass the current through a conductor, then it will create a magnetic field around it. Depends on in which direction we are passing the current. So if you are passing the current from left to right, then it will create in a clockwise, or it will be in anti-clockwise direction. But that magnetic field is very less. So to increase the magnetic field strength, what do? We will wind the coil into number of turns that you can see here, and that will give us a strong magnetic field around the inductor. Now, one of the application of this inductor is we can use this inductor in the transformers. Now, if you see here, if you apply the AC voltage signal here, we know that the AC voltage signal is one which varies continuously with respect to time, like this. It is continuously varying with respect to time. Positive peak, this we call it as the positive peak. Let me write clearly. This we call it as positive peak, and this we call it as the negative peak. So now in the transformers, whenever we want to increase the voltage or decrease the voltage, what do? Is that we will use a concept called electromagnetic flux concept. Sorry. Electromagnetic flux, EMF. In short, we call it as an EMF, electromagnetic flux. So what happens is that whenever we apply an electric field, whenever we apply the AC voltage across this, the current flows through this. So current flows. Whenever the current flows through this coil, what happens? A magnetic field is created. So this magnetic field will induce the current in the secondary winding. If this is called the primary winding, this is called the secondary winding. Now this magnetic field induces the This magnetic field induces the current in the secondary winding, and this winding on the other end will pass on the current. Now, if I call this is the current I1, then this is the current I2 across this secondary winding. Let us call this as I2, and this in turn we will get the voltage. So in most of the electronic devices, the very first thing will be having a transformer. So because you use any mobile adapters or any ditched what is say electronic equipment requires the power, say maximum of 12 volts DC. Okay, when we need the maximum of 12 volts DC, whatever we get in the socket, and that is the home main supply, is the AC signal which is of 240 volts, and we have to reduce this voltage to 12 volts. So one of the method to reduce this voltage is we can use the transformer, and with the use of transformer in the secondary, what do we do? The number of turns we'll reduce it. When we reduce the number of turns, then the amount of magnetic induction take place, or the flux mutual inductance which takes place will be less, and in turn it will give the less current, and which will result in the lesser voltage. So this is how we can reduce the voltage in the secondary, or we can increase the voltage in the secondary winding. So this is one of the application of inductance. Hope it is clear to you all. If you have any queries in between, you can ask the question. Now we will move ahead with the next topic, that is semiconductors. In the introduction session, I told you every material is made up of atoms, and these atoms has the center nucleus, and around this nucleus there are orbits in which the electrons will be revolving. So these are the different orbits in which the electrons will be revolving, like our solar system. And the combination of these atoms will give us certain material. Now we are talking about the semiconductor material. Whenever we talk about the semiconductor material, there are few semiconductor materials which are mostly wide used in electronic devices. So one is the silicon, and second is germanium. So these are the most widely used most widely used the semiconductor materials. The silicon material is widely used because of its availability. It is made up of, we extract this silicon from this silica. The silica is nothing but we obtain from from this sand. So a purified version of sand will give result in silica, and again we further purify this silica to obtain this silicon material. So we have to understand the atomic number of this silicon. The atomic number of this silicon is 14, and the atomic number of germanium is 32. What do we understand from this? So silicon material has 14 electrons and 14 protons. Germanium has 32 electrons and 32 protons. Is it clear? Yes. So atomic number indicates that the number of electrons and protons this atom has, each individual atom has. So silicon has the 14 electrons and 14 protons. Germanium has 32 electrons and 32 protons. Now let us take 4 such, let me write one complete structure of silicon atom, then we will consolidate that. Okay. Now 14 electrons means in the first orbit there will be 2 electrons which will be revolving. So it should be 2n square. 2n square means in the first orbit there will be 2 electrons. N defines the number of electrons, and 2 1 square, which is 2. Next is 2 with second orbit square, so it means 4 and 8. So second orbit can have 8 electrons. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. 8 electrons. So how many electrons we have totally now? So we have 2 electrons in the first orbit and 8 electrons in the second orbit. How many electrons it has become? So this totally it has become 10 electrons. What is the atomic number of the silicon? So the atomic number of silicon is 14. So how many electrons we are left out with? 4 electrons. So in the next orbit, that is in third orbit, we are having how many electrons? 4 electrons. So that is 2, 3 square. It's supposed to be 18 electrons, but now what happens is that the third orbit is partially filled. It is partially filled with only 4 electrons. That is why this outermost orbit is called as the valence band, or the outermost orbit. Yeah, it is called as a valence band because the outermost orbit is partially filled in most of the atoms. So you have to remember this atomic structure because we are going to consolidate in the sense. Now, whenever I write the another similar kind of atoms, I will not write the entire structure. I will be writing only in terms of the outermost orbit because innermost orbits are it is completely filled. So first orbit has 2 electrons, that is 1 and 2 electrons, and second orbit has 8 electrons, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the outermost orbit has 4 electrons, 3. So whenever I write next time, I'll write only in terms of the valence orbit. This is also called as the valence orbit because the outermost orbit of any atom, we call it as a valence orbit. Now let me write this. So I'll write the nucleus always, just for our understanding. And then I'll write only one orbit. And I'll write the 4 electrons. Okay. So it is understood that there are 2 more orbits inside, which is not necessary to define every time because I'm interested only in the outermost orbit, valence orbit. So this is the 4 electrons in the outermost orbit. Now let us write one more, atom here. Let me write in the center. Yes. So one more silicon atom. Again, I am writing only the outermost orbit. 1, 2, 3, and here it is 4. All right. Now let me write one more here. Okay, so this is the nucleus. So 1, 2, 3, and this is one more 4. All right. So let me write one more here. So this is the nucleus, one more atom. So it has the 4 electrons in the outermost orbit, 1, 2, 3, and this is the 4th one. Now there is one more. Let me write this little at this point. Now there is a nucleus and these 4, 1, 2, 3, and this is 4th one. Okay. If you consider this is the center atom here. Okay. There is. Okay. If this is the center atom here, then we have the 4 neighboring atoms. So if I call this as center atom, there are 4 neighboring atoms. That is 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the center atom has 4 electrons of its own in the outermost orbit. Okay, so that might be this 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now with the combination of 4 more atoms in its surroundings, this center atom is going to share its electrons, and the neighboring atoms also is going to share its electron. You can consider something like this. There are two houses. I'll name the walls 1, 2, 3. Now, can you tell me which wall is being shared with the two houses? Everybody knows. Which one? Quick, quick, quick. There are two houses. Okay, let me write the door here so that you can make out the two houses. Which is a common wall? Common wall is 2. So whether this wall belongs to this house, H1 or H2? Can you tell me? Yes, it's correct. So now the wall belongs to both. So what happens here, if we think of the same concept, if you apply the same concept here, now this has the 4 electrons and it is going to share one of its electron, this atom. It's going to share one of its electron with the center atom. Again, this also it will share its one of its electron. Sorry, this one of its electron. Let me write with different color so that you can understand which are the shared atoms. I'll use the red marks. So this is the shared atom here. This is the shared atom. This is the shared atom. Sorry, not atom, my mistake, a shared electron, sorry. This is the shared electron. So now, how many electrons does the center atom has now in the outermost orbit? Can I get the answer? Very good. Very nice. You understood. So the centermost atom in the outermost orbit, it has 8 electrons. So for any atom to be completely filled, the outermost orbit should be in this form. Either it should be 2 electrons, 8 or 18 electrons. So when we say the electron is filled with these many atoms, we say that the orbit is completely filled. It means no more electrons can be accommodated. So now in this case, what happens? The silicon material acts like a perfect insulator. It acts like a perfect insulator. It means the silicon material or a semiconductor material has a property that it acts like either a insulator or it can act like a metal or a conductor. Rather than writing metal, it is not a metal, is not a right word. I'll call this as conductor. Okay. So at a times the semiconductor material acts like an insulator, and at a times it will act like a conductor. When does this semiconductor material acts like a conductor? So if any of these electrons will move out from this, so then it will act like these free electrons will contribute in the flow of current, and then this semiconductor material acts like a conductor. If this, when it is completely packed like this structure, so then it will act like a insulator. So it is called as a pure semiconductor material. Whatever we have just understood here, so it is called as pure semiconductor. Why do we call pure semiconductor? Because its outermost orbit is completely filled, and in this case it will act like a insulator. And if you want to make to act like a conductor, then we have to apply certain external force or pressure or something, so that what happens is that this electron which is here, it will leave this, a hole is created, and this electron will be contributing flow of current. But again, here the concentration of hole and the electron is same. If there is one electron left, then there is one hole is created. So the concentration level remains to be same. That is why it is called as the pure semiconductor material. And the type of bonding which it forms here, it is called as the covalent bonding. It is called as covalent bonding. All semiconductor materials will form the covalent bonding. This is one of the question which may come. what type of bonding a semiconductor material has, dash, and or the objectives will be there. 4 options will be there. So you can choose the right one, that is the covalent bonding. So this will be one of the question. So why we are discussing this? Because we are going to study about the 2 types of semiconductor materials. That is, the first one is diode and the second one is transistor. So to understand the diode and the transistor structure, first we need to understand this, the semiconductor material, how they are formed like a material. If you look into the very micro level, because at the micro level, all these join together, they form the covalent bonding and they form the pure semiconductor material. Let me write like this: a crystal structure where this is called as pure semiconductor material. Can we use this pure semiconductor material to fabricate any of these devices, diode or a transistor? The answer is not exactly. Why? Because it has not very great electrical property. Electrical property in the sense, when we say the semiconductor acts like a insulator, also as a conductor, then during the conduction time, it should have very good electrical property. And to have a very good electrical property, we will add some impurities in this. Impurities in the sense, we will add another type of atoms which are not at the parent atom. Here the parent atom is either it will be all of them will be silicon atoms or all of them will be germanium atoms, any one type. Now to this we will add another type of atom in between. That might be, we can call it as pentavalent atoms, or we will add trivalent atoms. What is mean by pentavalent and trivalent? Now you see here in this atomic structure, whatever we have written, the outermost orbit has 4 electrons. So it is called as the quad material, quad atom. So pentavalent means, similarly, if we take phosphorus, well, atomic number of phosphorus is let us I'm not sure, I have to refer it. Atomic number of phosphorus, I know there are 5 electrons. Let me Google this here. Okay, the atomic number of phosphorus is 15. It means it has the 15 electrons and 15 protons. So when we are going to place this in the orbits, so first 2 will be here in the first orbit. Next, second orbit will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And the outermost orbit will have how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. So now you look into this. The outermost orbit has how many? 5 electrons. Now, if we combine this phosphorus atom with the silicon atom, what will happen? Let us quickly write one more structure here. This is a phosphorus. So it has 1, 2, 3, 4, and one more electron. I'll write it here. Now, if it is shared with the neighboring silicon atoms, so this is silicon atom. So silicon atom has 4 electrons in the outermost orbit. I'll write the shared one in different color. So this is the shared one here. And there is one more neighboring atom of silicon. This is Si. This is also Si. So it has the 4 electrons, 1, 2, 3, and this is 4. Let me write this with one more color here. to make you understand this one. Now likewise we have here, so it does not come neat. Let me write this. So this one, so this has 1, 2, 3, and here 4. So let me write with the color. Yes, and there is one more which will going to be shared. This is silicon. This is 1, 2, 3, and we have the fourth one here. So we'll write this here. Okay. Now this is Si, this is also Si, this is also Si. Now this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Because only the neighboring atoms can be 4 atoms, it cannot be more than that. Now this phosphorus has 5 electrons in the outermost orbit and it is shared with the 4 neighboring atoms. It means the 4 electrons have been shared with the neighboring atoms. So this is the 1, 2, 3, 4. Now there is one more atom which is not shared, that is this one. Now since this electron is not been paired with any other neighboring atoms, now it has more liberty to move out from this atom whenever we apply an external voltage or any due to temperature or anything, and this will contribute in flow of current. Okay, so it means we have increased the electrical property. We have increased electrical property by adding a phosphorus atom in between the silicon atoms. We need not to add with so much of concentration. The concentration should be very less. So this is how we increase the electrical property. Trivalent atom means what happens is that I'll edit in the same thing. For example, if we take the boron, so boron has only 3 atoms in the outermost orbit. So what happens? So it can share with only 1, 2, 3 with 3 neighboring atoms, and this here it is whole is there. It means it cannot share one of the atom with this another neighboring atom. So that will increase the number of holes in the structure. So if we increase the number of holes, then we call it as it is a trivalent, or in short we call it as a p-type material. Whereas in the previous case where we had one extra electron, so that we call it as a pentavalent material, so which in turn we call it as n-type of material. So n-type of material means there are more number of electrons. P-type material means there are more number of holes. Okay, so if we write like this, a structure, so this is the p-type material and this is the n-type material. So what is the more number of in the previous case we have seen that there was one free electron, one more extra additional electron, so it means there are more number of electrons here. And in the p-type there are more number of holes, so holes are indicated by positive. And also understand it is not only that, whenever we apply, now for example this is a p-type structure. If I put this in a complete structure, then this is how it looks. And if this gains an additional electron here, if it's get filled additional electron, so now it means the then what happens is that in this material we can say there are also minority carriers. So these minority carriers in the p-type are electrons, and here the minority carriers in the n-type are holes. Hope you have understood this. Majority carriers and minority carriers. For trivalent, it is a boron. It is not phosphorus. Majority carrier means when we add a pentavalent atom in a semiconductor material, then the type of material we will get, that is called as n-type material or a pentavalent material. So then there will be more number of electrons, where there are more number of free electrons which will be contributing in the flow of current, and very few holes will also be there which will contribute in the flow of current. And here, whenever we dope, the process is called as doping. Whenever we add an impurity, it is called as doping. So even this will come in the question. What is the meaning of doping? Is it adding impurities, removing impurities, something like that? This question will come. So it means we are adding here, if we add the trivalent atoms, means which has the atomic number of, for example, boron is there, where its outermost orbit is having only 3 electrons. So then it cannot share with the fourth neighboring atom, so it results in hole. So that type, then it will result in this p type of material where it has more holes than the electrons. Okay, so understand this much now. And the minority carriers will be electrons in that. Now what happens if we bring these two materials close together? If we join these two materials, what will happen? So this is a p-type material and this is n-type material. When we combine these two materials, here this is P and this is N, then due to high concentration from both the ends, there is a diffusion process takes place. And this diffusion process, what happens is that it will try to cross these boundaries of this material. Then what happens is that it will create a region across this boundaries. So this boundary we call it as the depletion region. So around this boundary, it's also called as a junction. So then what happens is that here ions are created. The negative ions are created on the p side and positive ions are created on the n side. So holes are here. Okay, and here electrons are there, more number of electrons. So what happens, all these has in the atomic structure. I told in the very first class we talked about the positive ion and the negative ion. Hope you remember that. So whenever any atom loses an electron, then that particular atom will become a positive ion, or whenever any atom gains an electron, so then it will become a negative ion. So that is what is happening here. So what happens here, there are more electrons. So this electron, when it crosses this junction, so whatever the atoms which are near this junction will become positive ions, and this hole is occupied with this electron, so that will become a negative ion. So this acts like a barricade. So this happens only at the initial state. After that, there is no flow of current, not current, there is no flow of charge carriers. Okay, it will stop, and this is only for a moment, a small moment or a duration. So that time, whenever the charges flow, we call it as diffusion current. Let us not go in much detail, it will confuse you a lot. There is something called diffusion current and drift current. So then drift current also exists, and which will neutralize this process. And when we measure across these ends, there is no flow of current. We say that there is no current exists. So basically you can understand this. When we combine the p-type and n-type material, it forms a junction. And in the junction, on the P side, there are negative ions, and on the N side, there are positive ions. This much you understand. And this junction acts as a barrier for electrons or the holes to pass. Means it will not allow any electrons or holes to cross this junction. Because when we apply the voltage across these points, the current should flow, and current should flow only when the junction allows it to flow. We will see this in the coming sessions. Don't worry. I hope you understood this much. So when we combine the p-type and n-type material, it will leads to formation of junction, and this device, whatever we get, this we call it as the diode, or in short we can call it as p-n junction diode. You might have heard this diode term in the electronic circuits, or you might have seen in the electronic boards there is a diode is damaged or something like that, you might have heard. So diode is nothing but, if you look into the internal structure of the diode, this is how it looks, the construction diagram. That will be p-type material, n-type material. When we combine, it forms a junction, and the junction comprises of ions, and on the p side we have more number of holes, and n side we have more number of electrons. Hope this point is clear to you all. I think I should have explained in the very first class about how the electrons flow. Yes, this in a conductor, the same principle is applied here also. Okay. Okay, so we will stop at this moment. We will continue this session in the tomorrow's. We will continue this discussion in the tomorrow's class. So tomorrow we will talk about this functioning of the diode as well as the transistor construction and the working of the transistor, and then we will see one or two applications of these diodes and transistor. Okay, if you have any queries or any doubts, you can ask. I'll keep the session open for the discussion. If there are no queries, then we'll wind up the session. Thank you, everyone. So I'll share the link for tomorrow's session early today itself. Good night. Take care.